Shalom, blessings, Most High in Christ. Bless everyone. Let's get into it. All right. We'll start straight out with the book of Josephus. All right. I'm going to read the oracles of the prophets concerning the destruction of Jerusalem. All right. So I'm in book The War of the Jews 4:6-3. I'm going to read 4:10-7. All right. It's something quick. So 4:6-3 in the book of the War of the Jews. All right. Book 4, chapter 6, paragraph 3. And it says, "And now the commanders joined in the approbation of what Vespasian had said. And it was soon discovered, it was found out how wise an opinion he had given. And indeed many there were of the Jews, the Israelites, that deserted every day. They ran every day and fled away from the Zealots, although their flight was very difficult, since they had guarded every passage out of the city, and they killed every one that was caught at them, as taking it for granted they were going over to the Romans. Still did he who gave them money get clear off, while he only that gave them none was voted a traitor." So the upshot was this was the advantage, that the rich purchased their flight by money, while none but the poor were slain, were killed. Along all the roads also large numbers of dead bodies lay in heaps. All right. Vast numbers of dead bodies, corpses lay in heaps, piles, and even many of those that were so zealous in deserting, leaving, fleeing, or running, and at length choose rather to perish, those that chose rather to die inside the city, within the city, for the hopes of burial made death in their own city appear of the two less terrible to them. But these zealots came at last at the end to that degree of barbarity, and as not to bestow a burial either on those slain in the city, or on those that lay along the roads, but as if they had made an agreement to cancel both the laws of their country and the laws of nature, and at the same time that they defiled men with their wicked actions, they would pollute the divinity itself also. They left the dead bodies to petrify under the sun, and the same punishment was allotted to such as buried any. As to those that deserted, that ran away or fled, which was no other than death, while he that granted the favor of a grave to another would presently stand in need of a grave himself. To say all in a word, no other gentle passion was so entirely lost among them as mercy. For what were the greatest objects of pity did most of all irritate those wretches, and they transferred their rage from the living to those that had been slain, killed, and from the dead to the living. Nay, the terror was so very great that he who survived called them that were first dead happy, as being at rest, already, as did those that were under torture in the prisons. Declare that upon this comparison, those that lay unburied were the happiest. These men therefore trampled upon all the laws of men, and laughed at the laws of the Most High. And for the oracles of the prophets, they ridiculed them as the tricks of jugglers. Still did these prophets foretell, they told the future, many things concerning the rewards of virtue and punishments of vice, which when these zealots violated, they occasioned the fulfilling of those very prophecies belonging to their own country. For there was a certain ancient oracle of those men that the city should be taken and the sanctuary burnt. The city shall be taken, the sanctuary burnt by right of war. By what? By right of war. When a sedition should invade, or uprising or civil war should invade the Jews, the Israelites, and their own hands should pollute the temple of the Most High. Their own hands will pollute the body of Yah. I'll read it again. For there was a certain ancient oracle, Israel, of these men, that the city should then be taken, and the sanctuary, the church, burnt by right of war. When a sedition, an uprising should invade the Jews, the Israelites, the Yahudim, and their own hands, their own power should pollute, defile the temple, the church, the body of Yah. And then there's a star, a note, but let's finish reading. Now, while these zealots did not quite disbelieve these predictions, they didn't believe the predictions about the future, they made themselves the instruments of their accomplishment. All right, their accomplishment was what? Defiling and polluting the temple of the Most High, causing sedition, right? And having the sanctuary burnt by right of war. All right, that's what happened. And that's what's going to happen again. Now let's read this note here. This prediction that the city Jerusalem should then be taken and the sanctuary burnt by right of war, when a sedition, uprising, should invade the Israelites, and their own hands should pollute the temple. All right. And when anyone should begin to slay his countrymen in the city. All right. It says it's wanting, so it's lacking in present copies of the Old Testament. On the Old Testament, see this page 104 to 12. But this prediction, as Josephus well remarks here, though with other predictions of the prophets, it was now laughed at by the seditious, by the ones that were uprising, and was by their very means soon exactly fulfilled. They actually accomplished it. What they disbelieved, they actually fulfilled. However, I cannot but here take notice of Grote's passive assertion upon Matthew 26:9, here quoted by Dr. Hudson, that it ought to be taken for granted as a certain truth that many predictions of the Jewish prophets, the Israelite prophets, ain't no such thing as Jewish, were preserved not in writing. It wasn't preserved in writing, but by memory, in the mental, the mind. Whereas it seems to me so far from certain that I think it has no evidence or no probability at all. But you know, we had an oral tradition. So it's something to think about. All right. But it happened just as the ancient prophets predicted. All right. Let's get 4:10:7 out of the War of the Jews. You can read it on your own time if you want. 4:10:7. I'm going to read that. So Vespasian's good fortune succeeded to his wishes everywhere, and the public affairs business were, for the greatest part, already in his hands power, upon which he considered that he had not arrived at the government without divine providence, without divine care, but that a righteous kind of fate had brought the empire under his power. For as he called to mind the other signals, the other examples, all right, the other warnings, signs, which had been a great many everywhere, that foretold he should obtain the government, that Vespasian was going to receive the government. So did he remember what Josephus had said, the Israelite, to him when he had ventured to foretell his coming to the empire. Josephus told the future that Vespasian would receive the Roman Empire while Nero was alive. So he was much concerned that this man was still in chains with him. He then called for Mucinous together with his other commanders and friends, and in the first place he informed them what a valiant man Josephus the Israelite had been, and what great hardships he had made him undergo in the siege of Jopta. After that he related those predictions of his. Then he told the predictions of the Israelite that he had in chains. So I'm going to read the note here. The note says, as Daniel was preferred by Darius and Cyrus because of his having foretold the destruction of the Babylonian monarchy, he told the future of that the Babylonian monarchy, by their means, by their own way, and the consequence and exhaustion of the Medes and Persians, the rise of the Medes and Persians. He predicted the future. Daniel also in Daniel 5:6, or rather as Jeremiah, when he was a prisoner, he was a what? Prisoner. He was locked up, was set at liberty. He was set free and honorably treated by Nebuchadnezzar, at the command of Nebuchadnezzar, on account of his having foretold the destruction of Jerusalem by the Babylonians. See Jeremiah 41:7. And so was our Josephus, the Israelite, set at liberty. He was set free. All right. Josephus was set free and honorably treated, just like Jeremiah and Daniel, on account of his having foretold the advancement of Vespasian and Titus to the Roman Empire. All these are most eminent instances of the interposition of divine care. So divine care to them is saying the Most High protecting them. And of the certainty of the divine predictions in the great revelations of the four monarchies. Several such like examples or signs there are, both in the sacred and other histories, as in the case of Joseph in Egypt. Right? He did it also. And of Judah, the high priest, in the days of Alexander the Great. All right. So let's read. Let's go back and read what we're reading. So after that, he announced those predictions of Josephus, which he had then suspected as fictions. He believed that they weren't true and suggested out of the fear he was in. He thought that Josephus was just saying it out of the fear he was in. But he wasn't. He was speaking through the word, the oracles of God, right? Yahshua, Christ. Okay, the Most High was dealing with Josephus. All right. That's why he wrote down the histories, the antiquities. So let's read it again. So Vespasian suspected all of these things to be fiction and suggested out of the fear he was in, but which had by time been demonstrated to be divine. It was, he couldn't lie or speak against it, right? Because it was true. It is a shameful thing, said he, Vespasian, that this man who had foretold my coming to the empire beforehand and been the minister of a divine message, a true message, a holy message, a message from God to me, should still be retained in the condition of a captive, a slave, or a prisoner. Right? They still had him bound up in chains. So he called for Josephus, the Israelite, and commanded that he should be set at liberty. That means free. Whereupon the commanders promised themselves glorious things from this requital. And Vespasian made to a stranger. Titus was then present with his father and said, "O father, it is but just, it's right, that the scandal of a prisoner should be taken off Josephus, the Israelite, the rumor, together with his iron chain. It should be broken in pieces. For if we do not barely loose his chains, but cut them to pieces, cut his bonds to pieces in half, he will be like a man that have never been bound at all. He'll be like a man that has been always free." That's what the Romans said. "For that is the usual method as to such as have been bound, chained without a reason." This advice was agreed to by Vespasian also. So there came a man in and cut the chain to pieces off Josephus. And while Josephus received this testimony of his integrity for a reward, and was moreover esteemed, respected as a person of credit as to futuritices also, of predicting the future. All right. So they had to set him free because he was speaking the truth. All right. So that's all I had on that. I don't know if I have some more. Let me see if I got some more. 6, 2, 1. Yeah, that's kind of long. I'll read it though. It's a little long, but I think I should read it. I think I missed a note. So hold on, guys. Let's see. There was another note, right? And this note, it says, "This is well observed by Josephus, that Vespasian, in order to secure his success and establish his government, at first distributed his offices and places upon the foot of justice, and bestowed them on such as best deserved them and were best fit for them, which wise conduct in a mere heathen ought to put those rulers and ministers of state to shame, who professing Christianity and acting otherwise, not like a Christian, and thereby expose themselves and their kingdom to vice and destruction. All right. Okay. So let's go where I was going. Says how Titus gave orders to demolish the Tower of Antonia, and then persuaded Josephus to encourage the Jews again to surrender, right? Okay, so I'll read it. Okay, so it says, and now Titus gave orders to his soldiers that were with him to dig up the foundation of the Tower of Antonia and make him a ready passage for his army to come up, while he himself had Josephus brought to him. For he had informed that on that very day, which was the 17th day of Phanemus Tammuz, the sacrifice called the daily sacrifice had failed and had not been offered to the Most High, for want, it says, for lack of men to offer it, the daily sacrifice, and that the people were grievously troubled at it. They were grievously troubled at it. Hold on. In the note, it says here, this was a very remarkable day indeed, the 17th of Phanemus, Tammuz, AD 70, when according to Daniel's prediction, 606 years before, the Romans in half a week caused the sacrifice and oblations to stop. Daniel 9:27, for from the month of February, AD 66, about which time Vespasian entered on this war, to this very time was just 3 years and a half. All right. And it says, see somebody's chronology published by Mr. Marshall on this year. Nor is it to be omitted that the very nearly confirms the duration of the war, that 4 years before the war began was somewhat above 7 years, 5 months before the destruction of Jerusalem. All right. So we're going to keep reading. And that the people were grievously troubled at it because the daily sacrifice was stopped, and commanded him to say the same things to John that he had said before, that if he had any malicious inclination for fighting, he might come out with as many of his men as he pleased in order to fight without the danger of destroying either his city or the temple. But that he desired he would not defile the temple, nor thereby offend against the Most High, that he might, if he pleased, offer the sacrifice which were now discontinued by any of the Jews whom he should pitch upon. Upon this, Josephus stood in such a place where he might be heard, not by John only, but by many more. And then he announced to them what Caesar had given him in charge to take care of, and this in the Hebrew language. He spoke in the Hebrew language. And then it says the same that in the New Testament is always so called. It was then the common language of the Jews in Judea, which was the Syriac dialect. That's what it's saying here. But anyway, so he earnestly prayed them to spare their own city in Hebrew, and to prevent that fire that was just ready to seize upon the temple, and to offer their usual sacrifice to the Most High in the temple. And at these words of his, a great sadness and silence were observed among the people. But the tyrant himself cast many reproaches upon Josephus, Vespasian did, with imprecations besides, and at last added this also, that he did never fear the taking of the city, because it was God's own city. In answer to which Josephus said this, with a loud voice, to be sure, you have kept this city wonderfully pure for the Most High's sake. The temple also continues entirely unpolluted, nor have you been guilty of any impiety against him, for whose assistance you hopest. He still receives his accustomed sacrifice, his daily sacrifice. Vile wretch that you art, said Josephus, if anyone should deprive you of your daily food, you would esteem him to be an enemy to you. But you hopest to have the Most High for your supporter in this war, whom you have deprived of his everlasting worship, and you imputest those sins to the Romans. You put those sins on the Romans, who to this very time take care to have our laws observed, done, and almost compel these sacrifices to be still given to the Most High, which have by your means been intermitted, stopped. Who is there that can avoid groans and lamentations at the amazing change that is made in this city, since very foreigners and enemies do now correct the disrespect which, it says, impiety, which you have done, while you who are a Jew, an Israelite, and was educated in our commandments, laws, are become a great enemy to them than the others, the heathens. But still, John, it is never dishonorable to repent and amend what have been done wrong, amiss, in error, even at the last extremity, the end. You have an instance before you, you have a time before you in Jeconiah. And Jeconiah, it says, our present copies of the Old Testament want this Iconium upon King Jeconiah or Joachim, which it seemed was in Josephus' copies. The king of the Jews, Jeconiah, if you have a mind to save the city, who when the king of Babylon made war against him, did on his own accord go out of this city before it was taken, and did undergo a voluntary slavery, to be a slave, with his family, that the sanctuary, that the church, the body, might not be delivered up to the enemy, and that he might not see the house of the Most High set on fire, on which account he is celebrated among all the Israelites in their sacred memorials, remembrances, celebrations. And his memory is become immortal, everlasting, and will be conveyed fresh down to our children through prosperity throughout all the ages. This, John, is an excellent example in such a time of danger. And I ask you to promise that the Romans shall still forgive you. And take notice that I, who make this exhortation announcement to you, am one of thine own nation, of your own people. I, who am a Jew, an Israelite, indeed, do make this promise to you, John, and it will become you to consider who I am that give you this advice, and whence I am derived. For a while I am alive, I shall never be in such a slavery as to forego my own kindred family, or forget the laws, the commandments of our forefathers. You have indignation at me again, and makest a clamor at me, and reproaches me, talk disrespectfully to me. Indeed, I cannot deny that I am worthy of worse treatment than all this amounts to, because in opposition to fate, I make this kind invitation to you, John, and endeavor to force deliverance upon those whom the Most High have condemned. And who is there that does not know what the writings of the ancient prophets contain in them, and particularly that oracle which is just now going to be fulfilled upon this miserable city. Of this oracle, see the note in 463, that Jerusalem will be destroyed. All right. So again, Josephus says, and who is there that does not know what the writings of the ancient prophets contain in them, and particularly the oracle which is just, which is true, now going to be accomplished upon this miserable city. For they foretold that this city should be taken when somebody shall begin the slaughter of his own countrymen, when they start killing their own countrymen, uprising, the sedition, civil war. And are not both the city and the entire temple, the church, the sanctuary, now full of the dead bodies of your countrymen? He's asking them a question. It is the Most High, therefore, and it is Yah himself who is bringing on this fire. It's Ahia that's bringing upon this fire on Jerusalem to purge that city and temple, that church, that body, by means of the Romans, because it's polluted, it's defiled. It says the Romans, and then it has another star. Josephus, both here and in many places elsewhere, speaks so that it is most evident he was fully satisfied that the Most High was on the Roman side and made use of them now for the destruction of that wicked nation of the Israelites, which was for certain the true state of this matter. And as the prophet Daniel first and our Savior Christ himself afterwards had clearly foretold. All right. So let's go back. That the city and temple by means of the Romans will be burnt and set on fire, and is going to pluck up this city. They're going to pluck up this city, which is full of your pollutions. It's full of your what? Pollutions. That means idols. It's supposed to be the salt of the earth, and you showing everybody wickedness. So the Romans says is going to pluck up this city, which is full of your pollutions. All right. And that's it on that. I mean, I can go a little further. And it says, as Josephus spoke these words with groans and tears in his eyes. His voice was intercepted by sobs, cryings. However, the Romans could not but pity the affliction he was under, and wondered at his conduct. But for John and those that were with him, they were but the more exasperated, angry against the Romans on this account because of it, and were desirous to get Josephus also into their power. Still did that discourse, talk, or conversation influence a great many of the better sort, and truly some of them were so afraid of the guards sent by the seditious that they waited where they were, but still were satisfied that both they and the city were doomed to destruction. Some also there were who, watching for a proper opportunity when they might quietly get away and run and get away, and some of them run to the Romans, and of whom were the high priests Joseph and Jesus, and of the sons of the high priest 3, whose father was Ishmael, who was beheaded in Cyrene, and 4 sons of Matthias, as also 1 son of the other Matthias, who ran away after his father's death, and whose father was slain by Simon the son of Gorius, with 3 of his sons, as I have already related. Many also of the other nobility went over to the Romans, the high class of the Israelites, together with the high priests. Now Caesar not only received these men very kindly in other respects, but knowing they would not willingly live after the customs of other nations, he called them to Gophna and desired them to remain there for the present, and told them that when he was gotten clear of this war, he would restore each of them to their possessions again. So they cheerfully retired to that small city, which was allotted them without fear of any danger. But as they did not appear, the seditious gave out again that these deserters were killed by the Romans, which was done in order to deter the rest from running away by fear of the like treatment. This trick of theirs succeeded now for a while, as did the like trick before, for the rest were hereby deterred from leaving by fear of the like treatment. There's all kind of wickedness going on, and betrayal and corruption. So yeah, that was again oracles of the prophets concerning the destruction of Jerusalem. War of the Jews 4:6-3, War of the Jews 4:10-7, War of the Jews 6:2-1. All right. And so that's it on that. All right. I'm going to leave it like that. This is what's going to go with the next video.